Welcome everyone to our Modern Day Mystery School. Very grateful to be here with you, UC crew. UC, of course, standing for Unfolding Consciousness, exploring the living universe and the intelligent powers in nature and humans. A 1,000 plus page, 4-volume work, some 20 years in the making, birthed by the extraordinary and remarkably free from his lower self-ego. It's true, the one and only Dr. Eddie Villamoria. Now, if you'd like to skip ahead and go directly to the reading of the book, please click the blue timestamp down below so you don't have to listen to my preamble. Again, because you are you, though, you get 25% off the hardback set. We've got a new code for you. All you have to do is, if you want to get a set of these for Christmas for someone or for your own library, just type in "I want my copy!" when you purchase through the Shepard Walwyn website. Thank you, Shepard Walwyn. And a quick question for you, please, please, please. There's no wrong answer. I would love to get your feedback, please. There's no judgment either. What are your thoughts on meditation? On your own meditation practice, on guided meditations? Which one works best for you? How do you feel about the ones that you listen to when you're going to sleep? What are your favorite things? So let me know, please. I'm just working on some stuff. We've been covering a wide range of subjects over the last year. Eddie has provided a mammoth text for us to explore, and today we are dipping into Volume 3. As these studies are in no particular order, Volume 3 is Gazing Through the Telescope. Man is the measure of all things. You have heard we are the universe in miniature. You've heard we're the microcosm to the macrocosm, but what does that all mean? What does that mean? Well, let's go. We are in the preamble of Volume 3, which is, its subtitle here, which is Man, a Miniature Universe, a Mirror of the Cosmos. Take a look here. Gazing Through the Telescope, Man is the Measure of All Things. Our yellow post-it study notes for this week are: self-inquiry is of paramount importance. The mystery teachings resolve scientific conundrums. In-depth and universal perspectives are both necessary. T.S. Eliot and William Wordsworth lament the common human condition, the excessive demands of worldly existence. That's true. Discerning outer and inner blindness and deafness. William Blake on the sensitivity of the senses. And transcending ordinary consciousness reveals new vistas. Socrates said that the unexamined life is not worth living. Now, this was the famous maxim. This is what he said when he was at his trial for impiety, for which he was then sentenced to death. So the unexamined life, are we looking at ourselves? Eddie begins, few among us would argue that human beings are the most complex creatures on earth. There are numerous internal and external pressures, as well as multiple inner and outer voices constantly demanding our attention, along with our ingrained habits that continually propel us from one sensation to another, from one thought to another. It's always go, 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 and from one opinion to judgment. The predominant feature of the conventional worldview of reality seems to be a constant oscillation between the poles of duality, resulting in habitual thoughts and actions. In Volume 1, the most difficult of all questions was asked: who or what am I? Who am I? What am I? Where am I? Why am I? Throughout the ages, poets and mystics have captured the essence of this question and sought its resolution with varying degrees of success. Reference was made to John Masefield's discerning reflections that man could not be just a thing of watery salt, and his equally apposite words, myself unwitting, meaning oblivious to, where their master dwells, the atoning Lord, here in the flesh, the never yet explored. However, with rare exceptions, the viewpoint of mainstream science, and therefore of society in general, fueled by the popular media, is that man is indeed a thing of watery salt. Or stated differently and more scientifically, Eddie says here, man is a biological machine topped by another physico-chemical mechanism known as the brain, which is the sole organ, this is what they're saying, the sole organ responsible for all sentient life and consciousness by a process that science itself admits is still most imperfectly understood. However, there is no question of a master or atoning Lord. The main purpose of Unfolding Consciousness, Volume 1, was, therefore, to demonstrate the compound nature of man. Its subtitle is A Panoramic Survey, Science, contrasted with the perennial philosophy on consciousness and man. The mystery teachings of all ages and regions have affirmed man's earthly nature to be essentially immortal spirit expressing and working through mortal bodies or vestures. We're immortal beings in mortal bodies. The transcendent vision of the great teachers has confirmed the truth of the perennial teachings that there is another way to see and experience the world. Awareness of these conditioned responses of establishment science, eye roll here, and orthodox religion, another eye roll, is the first step in breaking our bondage to them. In Volume 2, Eddie has written, one of our favorites so far, we love Volume 2, which is peering down the microscope, man's internal landscapes, looking at what we are. Eddie's crafted our approach as a microscopic and in-depth examination of man's constitution and nature in order to explain the compound nature of his being and detail the immortal and mortal components of his complex makeup. A major objective was to demonstrate that consciousness is not generated by the brain. It is not, nor is consciousness solely dependent on the physical body and our brain, but it survives after death. Of the latter, of the body, as substantiated in the occult philosophies of widely different cultures from antiquity to the very present moment. Now here in Volume 3, through gazing through the telescope, man is the measure of all things. Eddie's approach here and our approach here will be telescopic, okay? We're telescoping, seeing the universal picture of man with the grand scheme of cosmos and nature. The prime objective is to show that man is indeed a miniature universe. We're a mirror of cosmos, in that all the forces and powers of nature have their correspondence in us. The philosophers of antiquity realized that humans, ourselves, were the key to the riddle of life. We are the key to the riddle of life, for we are the living image of the divine plan. There's nothing more important for us to do than understand this. Therefore, Protagoras wrote, man is the measure of all things. But for such an undertaking, we have to be quite clear about the fact that what we experience depends on our state of consciousness. Again, what we experience depends on our state of consciousness. This begs the question, what is the sensitivity and purity of the instruments of our perception? In other words, we're looking through these eyes. Through which eyes are we looking? The instruments of perception. What is the one central factor that clouds a person's awareness and discernment of the deeper realms of existence? What is it? It is not difficult to identify, Eddie says. Materialism is a contributing factor, but not the central one, which is quite simply worldly weariness. Life on earth is difficult. Excessive involvement and engagement with the material world, over and beyond the natural requirements of survival and physical life, induces an inner fatigue. It dulls the mind and sensitivity and sensibility, and it clouds our perception. It's true. Fueled by the internet, we live in an age where it becomes increasingly difficult to discern wisdom from the tsunami of knowledge produced by avalanches of data. And as a consequence of this alternative truth, a virtual reality of truth, Eddie writes perhaps, a contamination of truth in contemporary politics, seems bound to bleed over into other areas of our life. Well said, Eddie. Some 3/4 of a century ago, the American English poet, playwright, and esotericist T.S. Eliot lamented the drowning of wisdom in a sea of knowledge. Knowledge of speech, but not of silence, he says. Knowledge of words and ignorance of the word. All our knowledge brings us nearer to death, but nearness to death is no nearer to God. Where is the life we have lost in living? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? The cycles of heaven in 20 centuries brings us farther from God and nearer to the dust. The sea of knowledge that T.S. Eliot bemoaned would have been a little garden pond of knowledge in comparison to what it is today. In fact, as far back as the 18th century, the English Romantic poet William Wordsworth captured the same sense of the human dilemma through excessive worldly cares when he wrote, The world is too much with us. The world is too much with us. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. In his time, the invasive pressures of the world were, of course, the booming industrial revolution that was transforming the age-old social and economic and political structures in Britain. But with that remarkable prescience, which means foresight, of a mystical poet, Wordsworth saw the ongoing pattern whereby excessive technology was slowly but ferociously eating into the human spirit and roboticizing the human being of flesh and blood. The world of today is flooded with data and information and knowledge. And this is the conventional outlook on education in schools and universities. Yet, what is needed more urgently, Eddie says, more than ever before, are transformational learning processes that empower people to engage in personal transformation, leading to wisdom that provides the rudder to navigate skillfully through the current changeable and unsettling times. Again, that is so important. Listen here. What is needed more urgently than ever before are transformational learning processes that empower us to engage in personal transformation, leading to wisdom that provides the rudder to navigate skillfully through the current changeable and unsettling times. Thank you, Eddie. Yes. Studying all of this is one thing, side note from me here, but putting it into application, then with ruthless, honest, and fearless, rigorous honesty, just self-examine, fearless self-examination, then we can work to make the changes necessary to do better. And leading to personal transformation, we change ourselves, we change the world. Okay. Whether it is the overriding concern over making money or how to best invest that money and spend it, providing for physical needs, or just the bane of existing, coping with a daily barrage of emails and navigating through numerous frivolous social media dramas, attention is absorbed and trapped by needy involvement with the external circumstances to the outer world. And that's so true. It's true. So what energy and inner space is then left for the demands of the inner world and inner life? Again, Eddie asks, what energy and inner space is then left for the demands of the inner world and inner life? Now, a shout out here to our very own beloved Chris Sheridan of Living the Inner Life, which is right here on YouTube. He calls his channel Living the Inner Life, and it's a metaphysical film school where Chris focuses on all the things you love. If you're here, you're going to love his stuff. He focuses on consciousness and spirituality, personal transformation, ancient wisdom, mythology, psychology, philosophy, as well as disability and healing. So if you are here, you're going to love his stuff. Please give him a follow. I'm going to throw his hashtag up here, so give him a follow over here on YouTube. Thank you, Chris. I love you. I'm going to include a link down below in the show notes as well. Eddie continues, it is but natural that in order to deal with the affairs of the world, we need to look through worldly eyes, the eyes of the flesh. But, so to say, that vision can now only be things of the flesh. Okay, so can sight using the eyes of flesh reveal the things of spirit? Let the Theosophy of Perinus speak for itself in this regard. Eddie writes, clearly referring to the fact that a man understands what we understand depends on our state of consciousness. The Christ states, those who live according to the flesh have their minds set on what the flesh desires, the earthly self. But those who live in accordance with spirit have their minds set on what the spirit desires. That's from Romans 8:5. Now, the problem with those who ask questions of the spirit, but look through the eyes of the flesh, which is a majority of us, is what faced the Pharisee Nicodemus. Now, we've talked about that and him in these studies, when he tried to fathom the secrets of the Christ's miracles. For that reason spoke the Christ, though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. That's Matthew 13:13. There is a subtle but enormous distinction between seeing, looking, observing, between hearing and listening. So we can see, but do we really see? Can we see? We hear, but are we listening? This confirms the validity of the well-known proclamation that blindness is not just an unfortunate loss of physical sight, but also there is none so blind as those who will not see. Naturally, then, the level of consciousness depends entirely on the sensitivity of the instruments of perception, which are your inner eyes and your inner ears. In the crisp words of English poet, painter, and printmaker William Blake, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. For man has closed himself up until he sees things only through the narrow chinks of his cavern. Now, we've talked about this in previous book studies, but many of you will know that the doors of perception, does that sound familiar? Well, it should. Well, this is my old rock jock coming out. Anyway, the band, The Doors, got their name, The Doors of Perception, from William Blake, from that quote, but they also started as The Doors of Perception. That was their name as a band, and they shortened it to The Doors. But anyway, the current fascination with psychedelic drugs, speaking of that particular time period, to achieve altered states of consciousness, entirely mistaken for spirituality, is about the best, surest, and quickest way to tarnish your doors of perception, Eddie warns here. Eddie expands on this in more detail later, and we will cover it, but really quick. In speaking with him about this, he gave a fantastic analogy. He uses the Mona Lisa. So he says, imagine getting the highest quality photocopy of the Mona Lisa, life-size. Almost impossible to tell that it is not the real thing, but it's a photocopy. Frame it, set it up on the wall, sit there looking chuffed that there you have the Mona Lisa, but it's not the Mona Lisa. It's not the real deal, is it? It's not. He says psychedelics will give you a peek, but working on yourself will earn your place. Okay. Remembering Blake's words, narrow chinks of his cavern, which echoes Plato's cave. Remember Plato's cave about not confusing the shadows with reality? And as it is infinite. In other words, not as Maya or illusion, as we see it here, but in reality, in what it is in itself. This means surely that there is something which lies beyond the duality and ephemeral nature of everyday life. Though the experience of it may be feeble for the majority of people, yet the dim remembrance still persists on the periphery of awareness, awaiting these moments when the chinks of the cavern widen. They widen, whereupon illusory attachment weakens. And during those moments, it makes its presence known in a brightened perception of the present moment. These are these spiritual revelations or these little glimpses you get. So different are such momentary experiences from the dreary norm that they become the touchstones of our life's direction. In the words of French philosophical writer Albert Camus, he says, "In the depths of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer." Illusion and reality are the two twin strands that weave the fabric of our earthly existence. The prevailing quality of our onslaughts into reality is a sense of expansion and connection. Just as space seems to divide, but in reality it connects and defines and pervades all things, so also we live, we move, and we have our being within that consciousness, which not only unites, but is unity itself. The more profound the experience, the deeper the awareness of an all-pervading, undivided consciousness. Now, Eddie moves on with a new way of knowing, and he spells new with K-N-E-W, a new way of looking. Here he writes a very noteworthy side tone. Although the voices of religion, philosophy, and the best of modern science in the outer world are calling out for us to deepen our awareness of the invisible higher power, the only authentic call which we can truly hear and respond to is the inner voice of our own higher self. In its elusive tones, it continually whispers to us through the intervening layers of our business and our worldly involvement to abstain from transitory pursuits and look beyond the illusion. You may ask, how are we to know about all the complex invisible realms of being that no physical instruments can penetrate? And the answer lies here, in the contrasting yet complementary ways of investigating nature and man by science and occult science. Accordingly, a new, again he is spelling this K-N-E-W, way of knowing is attained not by a scientific laboratory experiment or an intellectual concept, both of which are useless for this sort of inner inquiry and research, but instead by the accumulated independent testimony of generations of seers, sages, and occultists of all epochs and all religion, the accumulated independent testimony from the East and the West, who have divulged the language of the mysteries and the keys to wisdom through the unfolding of the appropriate instruments of investigation for this purpose, namely the unfolded faculties and capacities of consciousness, which make evident consistency and self-consistency with every department of visible, observable, and invisible nature, attained through strenuous personal reflection by dedicated students of the Philosophia Perennis for innumerable decades with no ulterior motive or internal bias, that have known and been shown the corroboration of the occult tenets with the facts and the experience of life, meaning by the experimentation in the laboratory of life, by way of discerning reflections of higher laws in the laws of physical science. For everywhere we find reflections of reflections. So the study and experience of these lower reflections here on Earth helps give us a glimpse into the nature of the higher realities in which they mirror. And above all else, through the voice of the silence. Within this phrase, borrowed from HPB's book of the same name, with these significant verses, which are quoted in a modernized version. So she writes, 3 halls, or states of consciousness, O weary pilgrim, leads to the end of toils and the conquering of temptation, and thus to rest eternal. If you would learn their names, then hearken and remember. The name of the first hall is ignorance. It is the hall in which you first saw the light, in which you shall live and which you shall die, the phenomenal world of the senses. It's earth, terrestrial consciousness only. The name of the second hall is the hall of learning. In it, your soul will find the blossoms of life, but under every flower, a serpent coiled. Does that sound familiar? The hall of probationary learning, the astral region, the psychic world of super-sensuous perceptions and of deceptive states. It is also the realm of drug-induced states. Now, the name of the third hall is wisdom, beyond which stretch the shoreless waters of the indestructible fount of omniscience. If you would cross the first hall safely, do not mistake the fires of lust that burn therein for the sunlight of life. Do not. If you would cross the second hall safely, stop not to inhale the fragrance of its stupefying blossoms. If you would be freed from karmic chains, do not seek for your teacher in those regions of astral illusion. Now, there is an audiobook of The Voice of the Silence here on this channel. I voiced the entire thing for you. It's completely free. I voiced it a few years back. I think it was 2016 or 2017, because I love you and I love this. So there's so much here. Eddie explains it so brilliantly, and I'm so grateful that you are here. Thank you. There is nowhere else I'd rather be and nothing else I'd rather be doing. If you would like to get 25% off the entire 4-volume hardback set, possibly for a gift for Christmas, we bought some for people for Christmas. Just type in "I want my copy!" through the Shepherd Waldwin website, and you can get 25% off. We'll be back here next week on symbolism. We're going to go further into volume 3. We have plenty to do here. So symbolism of the human body is next week's subject. I love you very much. I am eternally grateful for you, and I will see you next week. Mwah.